probably had 2 conversations over a 2-year span with the people that ran our direct marketing operation. And as a party committee, the DNC runs a very large and robust direct mail operation. So we were just not coordinating basic things in terms of, are you complementing direct mail outreach with email strategy or any type of digital advertising or texting? And I think that's the biggest way we've been able to make an impact over the past couple of years.
What are the key lessons learned over the last 2 cycles in terms of how you're coming at, especially the digital piece to this?
Yeah, we've been able to do some research with people that receive direct mail from us and just identifying simply what is the value of having that person also get emails from you, having that person also receive text from you. And we've been able to track that there is an increase in the value of an online, just a grassroots donor simply if they get another touch point from you. So for example, if the only way you're talking to someone is telemarketing, it's more effective to talk to them via telemarketing and direct mail, so on and so on and so forth. We ran an experiment this past year where we texted through a list of about 100,000 people that had received direct mail from us, and we found that just simply sending them a text message, just directing them, saying like, hey, want to make sure that you got our direct mail piece, that lifted their conversion fully by 22%. And what it was happening was people weren't giving through the text message, they weren't hitting the link associated with that source code. They were just reminded like, oh, I should go open my mail. And we found that
so you're actually doing what traditional marketers have always called mixed media modeling, and actually finally bringing this internally and getting a sense of the actual attribution and the ways in which the overlap impacts different channels.
Right. I feel like omni-channel is the
omni-channel is the new catchword.
Yeah.
Quickly, what is the key role of the DNC now? Obviously, you don't have a nominee named. So what are you doing now? Up until the convention?
So the simplest answer for this is, especially for those of you who are reading all of various Politico stories and everything, the DNC is the only legal entity that is legally allowed to coordinate with the eventual presidential nominee. You will see a lot of news stories out there about organizations that are building for the general election. Most of them are prohibited by campaign finance law of working in direct coordination with the actual presidential nominee, campaign finance laws being what they are. So we, as the official party committee, when there is a nominee, we will just plug right in and work in direct coordination. So most of what we are doing right now is preparing for that eventuality. We talked a little bit I think this time last year about we had a year to really get ready for this year, and we did a lot of structural things with our organization. We switched mass mailers, we rebuilt our website, we revamped our social analytics platform, and now heading to 2020, I'm very glad we did all of that because we absolutely don't have time to do that in 2020. And the thing we are really doing now is just developing easily transferable assets for the nominee. And also, I'll give you an exclusive here. The DNC also doesn't know who the presidential nominee is going to be. So we really
Should I be a wise ass and say unlike last time?
But as a yeah.
I'm sorry. That was
No. We deserve that. I say that as a Hillary Clinton staffer. But you just look, and whoever the nominee is going to run a different campaign, right? They'll have different persuasion universes. They will have different organizing strategies. And one thing that really can apply for them are volunteer prospect lists and donor prospect lists that are well curated, well built, and just structural processes we can hand over. And also, I'd be remiss too if I didn't talk about staff. The Democratic primary was so big this year, where in 2012 or 2016, which are both presidential campaigns I worked on, this time 4 years ago or 8 years ago, the presumptive nominee, if you will, had really collected most of the staff talent, right? This year, because there were at various points dozens of people that could have viably won the Democratic nomination, which is to say nothing of the immensely talented people that are out there running Senate campaigns and governor's races and working at state parties. The talent's a little thin on all these presidential campaigns. And what me and my role, I'm trying to focus too on making sure we are recruiting, hiring, and training people that are capable of running a presidential campaign in 2020 because like we're going to have to play a fairly major role there.
So tell me a little bit about what it means to make this sort of plug and play. So you're building for easy transferability. Mm-hmm. What are the things then that you focus on in order to do that? And what are the ways in which you're structuring the data, the processes, so it makes for an easier handoff?
Mm-hmm. Probably the easiest example I could give you of this is it's actually not a thing the DNC does, but it's more a thing the broader Democratic ecosystem does. If you've spent any time reading about online fundraising, really a very funny thing to do, if you're me, is you come to a conference like these, and sometimes they'll have a panel of Republican strategists talking about online grassroots fundraising. The #1 topic at every Republican online fundraising panel is ActBlue, the Democratic online payment processor. Mm-hmm. They're obsessed with it in a way which is really rewarding for me personally. And ActBlue has been around for 14, 15 years at this point, and it's really from the grassroots up. Like, they built themselves. They really earned their way into the conversation, and right now, ActBlue raised over $1 billion from grassroots supporters in 2019, which is more than, I believe, 2017 and 2018 put together, which is crazy when you think about, like, how many stories did you read about how much money Democrats are raising on the internet in 2018, and we raised more than that in 2017, 2018 combined last year on ActBlue. ActBlue has a list of supporters, basically, where you can save your payment information to make a one-click donation. You know, this is not a radical concept to people, but if you have your payment information saved and you can make a donation in one click, your conversion rate just explodes in terms of how likely you are to make a donation. ActBlue has like 8.2 million Democrats who have saved their payment information on their platform at this point, which is, I think on the Obama campaign we had some equivalent of that, which by the end of the 2012 Obama campaign we had 1 million people who had taken that action, and like we thought that was incredible. 1 million people that have saved their payment information. Whoever the nominee is, if there's 8.2 million people that have saved their payment information, like that's really going to help the Democratic nominee, to say nothing of all the down ballot candidates, just raise scads of money from grassroots donors. And as we know, like grassroots fundraising really looks like if you graph it over time, it really looks like a hockey stick. You know, we're kind of trundling along right now, and then in September and October it will just explode in terms of the rate at which people are giving.
Let's put up that slide. You brought a couple of illustrations of the ways in which things have changed, and I think I found it really illuminating. Let's go to the first one because it really breaks down some of the transformations that have taken place. Green button.
There we go. Oh, there we go.
Oop.
Got to the end of the presentation. You're on. Great.
There we go.
This is the right slide?
No, actually it was the next one, but do you want to
talk
through?
Well, we'll talk about
let's
this.
do this one.
Hopefully this is big enough for people to read. There's a lot of text on it. Is there anything in particular that jumps out to you here?
Well, I think the transformations from that cycle to this cycle.
Wow. The two things I'll say about this is, one, I feel like when people usually they come to these things, there's like the implied nature of like the reason we got better is because I'm in charge and I'm smart. That's not the case on this one. Perhaps to your point about past generations of the DNC, past generations of the DNC just didn't take this sort of thing this seriously. I don't think that's a controversial statement to make. A lot of what the DNC did previously was essentially just like remnants of the Obama campaign, which you're running on fumes essentially, like with our email list. Yes, we had the Obama campaign email list, which was an incredible asset and did take millions and millions of dollars to build and over time or anything, but we didn't really maintain it, and it just degrades as an asset over time. And part of what we're talking about when we talk about transferring the nominee assets is, sure, anyone can give anyone an email list, right? It's a spreadsheet with names in it, but like, have you kept those supporters activated? Have you kept them engaged? Have you treated them with respect such that, when you do email them in 4 months, they're not just burnt off and having reported you as spam? And that's what we are doing right now. We are also trying to keep the lights on for our organization, which is no small thing. But the thing I'm particularly proud of having figured out in the past couple of years is we've spent a lot of time focusing on email deliverability as a structural concept, and we've gotten so much better at it in recent years. Like our inbox placement rates for our email program are probably double what they were this time 4 years ago.
What moved the needle with that? What have been the key changes that made that possible?
Being smarter about not sending it to everyone on our email list. So identifying...
Lower frequency actually helped raise conversion.
And being variable about it. There are people that really just want to get 2 emails from you a month. There are people that actually will tolerate 4 emails a day. And really identifying which of those supporters are which based on their user behavior over time.
So you were actually being, that's my point, you were actually starting to use individual user profiling
Yes.
to understand
Yes.
the responsiveness to the email channel
Correct.
and making adjustments accordingly. So that level of granular personalization is really what was moving the needle.
Like we have people on our email list who we know the only time they engage with an email is when Barack Obama emails them, because they've told us that. They've essentially in their behavior said, like, I'm only really interested when Barack Obama sends me an email. We have actually listened to that user behavior this year as opposed to previous years when it's just like, we assume you want 4 emails a day. People don't.
I know that you're also very high on SMS. And sort of to draft off of some of the points about peer-to-peer messaging before, tell us about what you're seeing in the SMS channel, how you're using it effectively, what's working for you there, what it's effective at and what it's not effective at.
SMS is kind of effective at everything. There's an industry standard email open rate is the last I read on this is something like 14%, as generally like understood to be a baseline of an email open rate program. With SMS, it's closer to 90-95%. And I think about that in like my own user behavior. I don't leave unread text messages in my personal inbox, and I do in my email inbox. I have heard from a few organizations, including at least one presidential, that people are raising more money in aggregate from SMS fundraising than they are email fundraising on the Democratic side now.
Well, that's a very big deal.
Yes.
Because email has been the centerpiece of fundraising for a number of years. Even when social was starting to make its mark, we still were seeing email dominating. And this is going to be a big deal.
Yes.
Are you able to get the same level of personalization? Are you able to do profiling off of SMS in the same way you can do an email, so you can get that kind of sort of optimization?
The short answer is yes, but it's less built out. We spent years building this out on email, and like we haven't quite hit that level of personalization on SMS. But yes, certainly. Like certainly, it's technically possible.
You said to me in our prep call, and it's why I named the session, that time is more important than money, is that obviously the big disadvantage is you're working against somebody, you're going to be campaigning against someone who's been in perpetual campaign mode for a number of years. By my count, on Facebook alone, Trump's page has spent tens of millions of dollars just in the last 18 months. And of course, there are a lot of people who point to the social channel and look at those numbers that you can readily see on Facebook, the level of spend, especially on the Republican side, going on, and ask the inevitable question: what is the DNC's attitude and approach about what that channel is good for? Whether do you meet micro-targeting with micro-targeting? Is this a turf war over Facebook that you need to wage, or how do you answer this level of spending and the level of micro-targeting that we've seen go on from the Republican side in past cycles?
It's a great question. I think Tim just said this in the previous panel, and I agree with Tim on most things, but I'll agree with him specifically on this point. I was happy that Facebook announced their policy changes last week, and they rolled out some stuff that's pro-transparency, and they also didn't roll out a massive restriction to their grassroots advertising program in the way that Google or Twitter did, such that they'll restrict our ability to do that. So I was overall happy to see that. But I think Tim and other people are right, where the answer to that is it's really hard to predict stuff on Facebook right now, because I feel like the ground is really shifting under our feet a lot with them, and I am not sure our space has caught up to just how much of the market share platforms like Facebook and Google have at this point. I was thinking a little bit earlier today. In 2012, 2012 was so different than 2008 in terms of like the presidential campaign, in terms of like what digital organizing capacity we had. Twitter was a thing. Twitter was not a thing in 2008, really. And then 2016, we basically really like invented texting and peer-to-peer and blast SMS as a concept. And whatever, I'm sure that difference will be obvious to us when we're sitting here again this time next year, what the big technological change was in 2020. I kind of think it might be really like these walled gardens platforms' dominance of the market and everything, and I'm not sure how that's going to look. My point is, to answer your question, I think we have a lot of faith in Democratic supporters, and I think when there is a Democratic nominee, we really believe that millions and millions of Democrats are going to step up to support that nominee, and they are going to really engage. And so much of what, if you look at the Facebook ad archive, so much of what the Trump campaign is doing right now is supporter acquisition, right? So that's the thing we really need to catch up to them in, is like, are we ready to catch up to them and making sure that we are acquiring Democratic grassroots donors and volunteer prospects, and like I'm confident that we will do that.
How are you using the social platforms now, or how important are the social platforms, in particular Facebook, to that acquisition strategy? Because I think in our prep call, you talked about how you've been diversifying your spend, and Facebook isn't as important, may not be as important to you as some others.
Yeah, Facebook's a critical part of our donor. I mean, that's where the people are. But yeah, I mean, we work a lot within the Democratic ecosystem. There are platforms like the Daily Kos and Democrats.com, which is like a community of grassroots activists that they curate and maintain. Like I'm talking about curating and maintaining communities. That's what people like the Daily Kos do. So we spend a lot of time working with those more progressive platforms who maintain supporter communities to engage them to support the DNC as well. And I think A, it's cheaper than Facebook, and B, it's people that are already cultivated and ready to take action online that we are going after there.
More efficient and higher conversion?
Yes.
So actually the good old-fashioned way of gathering an audience by content,
yes, and
cohorts is proving more effective in terms of conversion than the high CPMs you might spend on Facebook to acquire.
That's our experience, yeah. Okay. And also, just from a messaging perspective, I think we will have this, I won't say problem, but this will be more the case once there is a nominee. The advantage the Trump campaign has over us right now is they know who their candidate is, right? They're able to be very authentic to him, and like, you know, they are, I don't think this is a controversial statement, very bombastic in their messaging on Facebook. And for someone like us right now, when we are preparing for like one of many candidates, we really do have to focus on that, like, values as opposed to personality driven, much more so.
What are your major concerns about the social platforms and how they'll be used or misused in the next cycle? And anticipating that, how do you counter them? I mean, is there a counter strategy to some of the excesses that you may see on these platforms?
Mm-hmm. We have a pretty, I would like kind of think of them as like a elite special forces unit. We have a very good disinformation team at the DNC who works with these social media platforms to identify pieces of disinformation that are going viral on various social media platforms. Like from an organic perspective, it's pretty rare for disinformation to have that much money behind it, honestly. Like, usually it'll be people sharing content and they'll just get organic.
Well, tell us how that works in practical terms. So you have a counter-information team. Mm-hmm. Tell us how many are in there, how are they communicating with the platforms? What does this look like when it happens?
We just established, like, we have relationships with the right people at Facebook, Google, Twitter. We are able to identify and escalate content. I can't go into too much detail about how we do that, but suffice it to say, I think our operation is pretty sufficient there for now, and it'll expand. And like, for what it's worth, it's kind of an unusual take to sit here and compliment Facebook on a thing. Facebook's taking organic disinformation pretty seriously, and I would give them a certain amount of credit for that. the criticism I would have of the giant tech platforms, and this is the thing that keeps me up at night, is, and you saw this with Google when they rolled out their new ads policy changes. I wonder if they know what problem they need to be solving. You know, Google really rolled out a lot of changes to their ad policy, which like restricted campaigns' ability to use first-party data targeting. So essentially, like we, the DNC, can't upload a list of people that have given money to the DNC before to target people appropriately with advertising. Right. That's crazy. That's our data, right? Like, why are you restricting us from using our data like that? And also further, what problem was that solving? Right? Was there a problem with people targeting donor data over time? And I know the platforms.
Well, they think they're solving for opted in.
Yeah,
right?
And like their communication could stand to be
what problem should they be solving for? What's the thing that worries you more?
Disinformation, organic disinformation.
And the algorithms that drive people deeper into it.
Yes.
Is there other than simply identifying the culprit, other than identifying either the culprits or the particular pieces of content, is this simply going to be a matter throughout the campaign of you trying to tag content and make notice of it, or are there other things that you can do to counter it?
I mean, certainly pushing the platforms to, because we are also users of the platform. We don't have access to the back end or anything, and making sure that platforms are also taking steps to identify this sort of content themselves and deal with it, rather than like having it come up through our systems. Yeah.
Let me open up for questions from the audience. Passion.
It's very bright up here.
I'm sorry. Did we have one right? Did we have one right up here? I'm sorry. I can't see through the lights.
I'll just say one more thing. I wanted to cover this. I feel like every time we had this conversation last year, and when you come talk at a conference like this, I feel like I'm supposed to show up with more flashy things, right? Like we're working on an algorithm to invent voter registration or something, right? Like, I don't know. Right. I see counterparts like this. If we win in 2020, I'll be back here with like
all the things you did.
I'll be back with that.
You're going to do your Garrett Lansing.
right. I might charge a speaking fee at that point, but you know, the single most underrated thing, and like this is the problem when you work for someone like the Democratic Party, is we probably have like the brand impact and awareness of something like Coke, right? Like Pepsi or anything. Like we're a massive household brand name. But like, what does a brand like that in the corporate space spend on their marketing budget relative to ours? Probably like, is it 1,000 times ours? 10,000 times ours? You know, we have like a very good team. It's small, you know, we don't have the level of resources usually associated with like, frankly, a kind of global brand. And the thing, especially over the past year, I've really noticed in the way we've been able to make an impact in, and I think a thing that would surprise everyone here, is how much time our team just spends in getting basic fundamentals right. Because that is really, truly, especially when we were talking about going into a presidential year, building the foundation, like a solid foundation that can support the weight of a presidential campaign, is the single most impactful thing our team's going to do over the next, 11 months.
Well, let me finish by teasing out something you said. Since you dropped the phrase brand, and having a big brand, how much are there any discussions? Do you discuss at all what role you have in building the Democratic brand and the ways in which you use some of these channels to do that, even before you have a nominee?
Absolutely. Certainly, from a visual brand perspective, it's our job to keep our visual brand tight. Make sure it's more humanity focused. But also right now, a cool thing about the democratic process is the primary process we're having right now is kind of an argument about what the brand of the Democratic Party should be, right? Like depending on the nominee, again, I'm not breaking any news here, Bernie Sanders' Democratic Party looks different than Joe Biden's Democratic Party. And there's some like there are key major values that like all of those people share, and especially like all of our Senate nominees, all of our gubernatorial nominees, all of our House nominees, stand for some like basic fundamental things, making sure that we have that brand forward. But I would go back to the basic fundamentals point where if our team is not getting some basic things about our visual brand, right, in terms of like, and it could be little things in terms of font, brand color selection. If we don't have that right now, like we'll just be a disaster in the general election. And that's really just making sure we're tight on the basics now is the most important thing I think we can do.
Patrick, as always, thank you very much. Yeah. Next year, let's see if you come back with bright, shiny objects after a win.